Coming back from New York the other day, watching a news segment on a plane without the sound on, we started to learn about all of the horrible connections between Donald Trump and the Russians. And since I wasn't listening to the sound and just watching what I was seeing on the screen, my first thought was exactly this.
Now witness the firepower of this fully armed and operational battle station.
Hi, everybody. I'm Bill Whittle here with Steve Green and Scott Ott, and this is your right angle on Donald Trump's Russian connection as seen through the much, much more interesting and larger picture of the essential quality of progressive politics. I looked at the video, gentlemen, and watched this hour-long show without listening to anything. The quotes came up. Donald Trump knew an investor in Russia. Donald Trump had once met a Russian minister. Donald Trump thinks Putin can be worked with, or whatever these things were. And basically what they were trying to do is they're trying to make the case that because of the email scandal leak, conceivably may have had Russian hackers involved with it, it's Donald Trump working with the Russians, you see, who caused the DNC leak, because if people start thinking about the DNC leak, then they start wondering about the State Department leak. And so what they're basically trying to do is they're trying to turn the source of the information into evil rather than the fact that it's the information that's evil. And the reason I thought about the emperor saying, now witness the firepower of this fully armed and operational battle station, is because I realized the power that the media has when they get behind a Democratic candidate. Now, Scott, we know from you that we saw during the email scandal that, in fact, this is what we've been saying the whole time, that the Democratic National Committee, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, can simply say to the New York Times, don't do that, we don't like that, and then or whoever, and then the editor will bow and scrape, say, I'm terribly sorry, when would you like to meet about it? I've got all day on Thursday. So watching this, Scott, I realized what was going on here, and what was going on was this kind of prestidigitation where, if you've ever studied magic, you understand that the human eye moves towards motion. It's a reflex. You can't control it. And the way a magician does what he does is he makes one hand move very quickly, your eye goes there, and then his action actually happens in the slow hand. So can you tell me a little bit about this idea that by simply moving the attention off of the fact that these emails were leaked and on to the fact that they were leaked by maybe some unsavory people, did we get a glance at what this machine is actually capable of?
Well, they were in the middle. The DNC was in the middle of a full nuclear meltdown, because nothing could be worse for the DNC than the revelation that this revolutionary movement behind Bernie Sanders, that had really taken the nation by storm and taken this totally unknown senator from Vermont and put him, neck and neck with Hillary Clinton, beating her in some of the primaries, that movement behind the scenes was being scuttled by the people who have sworn that they will be agnostic when it comes to the outcome of the primaries. The parties are not supposed to pick favorites in the primaries. The party mechanism, the party apparatus, all they're supposed to do is facilitate the debates and make sure that things happen on schedule. But nobody's supposed to be working for or against any of the candidates. Well, Bernie Sanders accused early on Debbie Wasserman Schultz of being, sort of hand in hand with Hillary Clinton. And as it turns out, behind the scenes, they were plotting ways to actually smear Bernie Sanders, particularly with regard to his faith in West Virginia and other places. So they were actually working behind the scenes to scuttle his candidacy. Worst possible thing that can happen to a party is to lose the trust of its own members. Not us. We don't trust them already. Who cares? But to lose the trust of its own members. So the full nuclear meltdown is happening, and all of a sudden the media steps in and inserts the neutralizing rods into the reactor core to immediately change the temperature and make the whole story about something that it really never was. And frankly, as a journalist, the offensive thing here is that whole story, that whole narrative that Donald Trump and somehow is working in cahoots with the Russians to release this information, all of it is based on no facts, no sources, no actual connections. It is all, hearsay. It is all implication and making correlations out of nothing. So there's no story there. And then to put that on all day long and beat the drum over and over and over. They don't need, as Rush Limbaugh has often said, it's not the crime really that matters. It's the seriousness of the charge. And the charge that somehow Donald Trump was fomenting this is very serious. I think most people in America are willing to forgive some things. For example, the DNC talking behind the scenes about, ridiculing their own donors and talking about putting major donors in really terrible corners at donor events and stuff like that and mistreating them. Well, I think everybody who works in any organization around the country knows that there is a behind-the-veil conversation that goes on that involves a lot of dark humor and a lot of sarcasm and even making fun of the customers. But what the DNC people are not willing to forgive is that you were trying to scuttle a revolution that was going to change the nature of politics in this country.
And may in fact have done so. May in fact have actually done so. May have cost him the nomination for a number of different ways. I really like the way you said that the media inserted itself between the meltdown and the audience, because frankly, Scott, this Trump-Russia connection is the most blatant intervention in politics that I've seen from the media since Candy Crowley inserted her person between Barack Obama and Mitt Romney. Mitt Romney had Barack Obama as a stuttering, lost, confused little weak man-child. Yep. Mitt Romney had him on the ropes. He's saying, can we go to the next question? Mitt Romney makes an actual a statement of truth, and Candy Crowley, realizing that the Democrats and the progressives are in trouble, inserts herself into the politics and saves him. I think it cost Romney the election.
It very well might have, yeah.
So, Steve, let's talk about something a little bit different here.
Sure.
I see something very similar here. Let me just not say similar. Let me say typical. Because what the Clinton campaign is trying to do here is they're trying to say that the leaks that, as Scott pointed out, are so damning to them, and they're trying to make the case that this came from the Russians, and well, the Russians are bad, so it's got to be that the leaks are bad. But you'll notice that they're not saying that it's not true. And what the Clintons do, and what Hillary Clinton has done especially, is whenever there's terribly devastating news, Jennifer Flowers steps forward, or any one of these women step forward with bad news, they don't deny that it happened. They start to attack the source. Bimbo alert, trawl a $20 bill through a trailer park and you'll get any kind of things.
Yeah.
They can't deny the accusations, so they have to attack the source. So my question for you, Steve, is if it turns out that the Russians, the Russian intelligence service, Vladimir Putin, in collusion with Donald Trump, released this information, what difference does that make?
Well, it's not in collusion. That's the thing. Donald Trump had nothing to do with this. Donald Trump said...
Just say what it was. What difference does it make? The point is that you're trying to pull the focus onto the source. No one is saying that this stuff didn't happen. The information is the same.
Yeah.
That's right.
It's not going to work, and at least I don't think it's going to work this time anyway. And let me tell you why. I know I told you guys this story during the break, and now I'm going to bore you with it again. But in Ronald Reagan's first term, 60 Minutes did this hit piece on him. I can't remember if they were trying to make him look evil or stupid, or most likely both, as our dear departed Andrew Breitbart once noted, or noted many times. But they did this vicious hit piece on him. It might have been Steve Croft. But for B-roll and for some of the interview stuff, they invited the Reagan administration. Reagan invited the 60 Minutes crew to his California ranch, where they shot a lot of B-roll. And the B-roll was of the kind of tough-looking president, even though he's 75, 76 years old, whatever. Tough-looking guy in his blue jeans and his cowboy boots and his cowboy hat. He's riding his horse, sitting high in the saddle. He's got his axe and he's chopping firewood. Just this big, tough, all-American guy. And the hit piece runs on Sunday night, and the next day, I think it was Mike Deaver, calls up from the Reagan administration. He calls up Don Hewitt, the producer of 60 Minutes, to thank him for running this hit piece on Ronald Reagan. And he was like, oh, what do you mean? I was just vicious. I just really attacked your guy. And Deaver said the only thing people are going to remember is Reagan riding that horse and chopping that firewood. So, they can throw up all this smoke about this Trump Putin connection and his dealings with Russia. But what are people going to remember? They're going to remember Donald Trump flying the jet that says Trump on it. They're going to see the buildings that have the name Trump on them. And what they're going to remember is, well, you know what? At least this guy gets something back out of his deals with the Russians. He's not just getting played for a sucker like we have been for these last 7 years. That's what people are going to remember.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. You know, watching this entire thing unfold, I began to realize again, the power of the media, the power of the social proof of the media, the power of turning on a network and hearing all of these accusations being blasted again and again and again around the clock and moving the spotlight off of the ugly truth that has always been the history of the Democratic Party and the progressives. It reminds me of a person who has to take a picture of an extremely, unbelievably hideously ugly baby. And they're being paid a great deal of money for it. And there's nothing you can do about how ugly the baby is. But you can play with the lighting, and you can play with the props, and you can put a mariachi band in the background, and you can have a siren wailing, and you can have fireworks exploding behind the baby, and then maybe you can have a meteor coming in and crashing behind the baby. And anything that you can do to get the eyes off of this ugly baby is a win for you, because you're, as Scott pointed out, you're in real trouble. You're in nuclear meltdown mode. The genius of Donald Trump, I think, is that when this accusations against him began to surface, he doubled down because he understands Steve's point. He understands Steve's point. The more we talk about this, it doesn't matter whether we're talking about it in terms of Donald Trump. Trump is smart enough to understand that every time the story comes up trying to make it part of him with the Russians, it comes up again. There was this horrific leak. Didn't Trump say, oh, well, I think the Russians ought to release the rest of her emails? But that's treason. No. Treason is putting those emails on an insecure server so that anybody can get to them. And Donald Trump understands this. He understands that the more we keep this story going about her lack of security, a lack of concern, the DNC's sneering disdain for their own voters, Trump understands that there's no such thing as bad publicity, as long as they're talking about the things that he wants them to talk about. I watched that on an airplane. I was just livid at the prestidigitation and at the tap dancing and the dog and pony show and the sheer desperation of it, the thinness of the evidence. You know, we've said before, and many people have said before, that if we had a fair media, not a conservative media, not a biased in our favor media, just a fair media, America would vote like Kansas. The Democrats would get the District of Columbia, and that's it. That's all. Evan Thomas said that Democratic people in media probably gave 15 points to John Kerry when he ran against George Bush. 15 points. That was John Kerry. If you think about how they love Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton, and you take 15 points out of every single state, take it out of one column, put it into the other, we win with 510 electoral votes or to 3 or whatever the case may be. You got to be aware of how the show works, folks. You got to understand how the magic works. You have to understand how the illusion works. It's fun to watch as long as they're not trying to control your life with it. But if they are, you'd better see the wires and you'd better watch the hand that's not moving, because that's where the coin is. For everybody here at BillWhittle.com and our entire Right Angle team, thanks for watching. Thanks especially to our members that make this possible every single week. If you'd like to be part of the fun, you can always go to BillWhittle.com and become a member today and help us get this word out. I'm Bill Whittle. We'll see you next time.